Hold on. I need to make sure my settings are um, up to par here. Let's see. Yep. So, how do I begin? Um, I know this is kind of unexpected, mainly because uh, I haven't really focused on being here for a while. Mainly, I've been kind of focusing more on my personal website where I talk about my approach to libertarianism, et cetera, so on and so forth. And uh, it's one of those. I had one of those moments earlier this week, and then it kind of hit me while I was at my one of my main jobs that allows me to pay bills and such. I work at night. I work retail, high stress, lots of high stress. But I've nearly made it 10 years. Before I begin, I'm going to preface this by saying this simple tidbit. I've been trying to kind of separate my talking about politics for the most part um, on this podcast or the Next Report podcast from my other podcast. But today I will make kind of an exception, as well as things regarding some of my personal life. Um, no, I'm not going to, open any closets and throw out skeletons or anything like that by any stretch of the imagination. But because of what happened at the beginning of this week, um, figured that I owe it to you to let you know kind of what's going on. And you'll notice that it's kind of it's the only light that's coming in is through the little window and where I'm at the moment. I don't even have the light on behind me, so it's going to be kind of dark, which is kind of appropriate actually because um, where do I start? It's one of those things where it doesn't surprise you, or in my case it doesn't surprise me, but at the same time it kind of numbs me, and it's going to take a bit for me to fully process this, but it's a reminder of a lesson that I was taught a long time ago by life itself, and I've had to be reminded of that a couple of times. This is the latest one of those moments. Some people call them epiphanies. Some people call them, signs and all of that good stuff. It's basically reminders of things that you've kind of set aside and forgot about. Um, so, where do I begin? Um, on the 1st of this month, August 1st, 2016, an individual who's lived around State College, Pennsylvania, was found dead. Uh, and from what little I've read, family does not suspect any foul play whatsoever. That too does not surprise me. There are people who believe that, um, oh my goodness, they criticized Hillary Clinton and therefore, they were suicided. Um, and part of me is glad that I'm not so deeply embedded in that mindset anymore. Another part of me wishes that I had a better pulse on mindsets like that. It's kind of reminded me to, not blindly agree with such things, but actually start keeping an eye out on these things again. The individual's name, he was born Scott Makeevka. He published various articles, essays, books, etc., under the pseudonym Victor Thorne. And I first encountered his name online years ago, early 2000s, around 2005, 2000. No, wait. It was 2004 that I encountered that name in December of that year. And I initially was going to write a particular book, and was going to consist of who's who of kind of, people who questioned the official narrative of 9/11, the narrative that we all know of 19 hijackers flying planes into buildings, and soon after the buildings just came down in New York City, and the Pentagon was attacked as well. So it was going to be a who's who, and I was going to do all this interviewing and this and that, and I actually contacted this individual. They actually replied, "Yeah, sure, whatever questions you have," and eventually it led to me interviewing them on their own show, and this is back in the days before YouTube got popular. Him and his cohort, Lisa Giuliani, the last was not her actual last name. That was another partial pseudonym being used. These people used plain HTML on their website. Actually, somebody set it up for them. And they used, hardware and software that required other people to have Real Player or some alternative installed. This, it was as cutting edge as it was at the time, but I digress. This character, Victor Thorne, quote unquote, I won't go into every single detail today, because there's families grieving, and what have you. And one of the quote unquote alternative media sites, the American Free Press, the last thing he was doing was writing for them. And next thing you know, he was gone. And there have been some individuals out there who didn't have very nice things to say about him. And I can understand the perspective of we should not talk ill of the dead. But when they've done certain things that are not so very good in the past, you shouldn't put them on a pedestal either. And again, I'm not going to get into full detail today. I'm just going to simply say, some of what's on my mind and from the heart. It's one of those similar moments where Richard Stallman of the Free Software Foundation said something to the effect of, he didn't wish, pain and suffering basically on, Steve Jobs when he passed away. He was glad that he was no longer going to be able to influence, from his perspective, software in such a way that that imprisoned the user of computers um, inside the walled garden and everything else and blah, 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 blah. I kind of have a similar perspective. Whatever happened could be depression, which I don't doubt there probably was some in the end. Um, Probably some sort of health issue that popped up that was not going to it was not going to end well. It would either break the entire body or eat away at the brain to the point where the mind just didn't function anymore the way it should. And and one of his relatives apparently reached out to this publication that he was working for and basically said, there was no foul play involved. He took his own life. And the one thing that a lot of people, and I understand suspicion and everything else, but the one thing that a lot of people don't understand about suicide, yes, there are those who claim they're going to harm themselves, kill themselves, etc., who are attention seekers. Those are called sociopaths, by the way. I've encountered one in my life who would say after the fact that they cut themselves, blah, 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 and everything else, and use that as a means of manipulating other people. That it's unfortunate. They exist in the world, but not everybody who attempts suicide will, slip up. In fact, when you do some research, you'll find quite a few people who end their own lives. You can't tell that there's something amiss. And that's the whole point. Wait a minute, they seemed happy, healthy, and at peace. Probably because they had already made up their minds what they were going to do. And that generally happens. There's been plenty of people before they, made the attempt to end their life. They were calm, peaceful, because they were going to escape. And it's one of those moments where, not to get creepy, by the way, I don't intend to come off that way. But if I had had a chance to look this person in the eye, physically look them in the eye, I would have told them that what they taught me was important. That you taught me what not to do in terms of media publication. You taught me what happens when you constantly attack other content creators. You taught me what happens when you work so many hours a week just to fund your operation, and you hardly get any sleep whatsoever. And you start seemingly losing your mind and going crazy. I've learned a lot over the years. I've learned that you can't be angry all the time. It's not healthy. It's one thing to no longer want illusions, but you can enjoy life too. It's no fun being miserable all the time. Yeah, there's a lot of assholes in the world. And yeah, there are a lot of people who want to do certain things without including others in the conversation. At the same time, you being involved and going to the FBI over an adult-themed satire against an internet radio station that was several states to the south of your location was not okay. And it took me a while during that 1 year to figure that out. It's also not okay to try to guilt trip people and make them feel like you're their enemy. It's not okay. Because the people that were targeted with this nonsense, the leader of that network, the owner of that network, had a wife and kids. And instead of ignoring them, and don't get me wrong, the person that called you guys out on a factual inaccuracy could have been more diplomatic about it. But you attacking everybody else and not coming up with anything original, you didn't multitask. In the end, things just fell apart because people will only go so long going off on wacky directions before they've had enough. Similar to how Donald Trump is starting to turn people off at last. It's because you can only get vague responses and redundant sentences for so long before a person goes, wait a minute, they don't have any substance, it's all fluff. You acted like you were the leader of some mafia. And you caused a lot of groups that could have reached a lot of people to fall apart. And that's not okay either. Whatever happened, I wouldn't have wished it upon you. But I also don't care for the fact that what you did caused a lot of fighting and caused a lot of people to be upset and angry at each other when they didn't have to be. And by no means was I Piers the Durban Snow on that one either. I stirred up my own fair share of drama years ago. Things have changed since then. And I'm one of the ones that still remembers what you did. And here's the thing about me. I won't forget what you did. I learned a valuable lesson, and that's to be my own person and not blindly follow somebody else. Of course, later reminders would come up when it comes to accepting contributions to your own platform. Don't let others dictate the direction that you're going in, because you're the one that built that platform. You're the one that calls the shots in the end. By all means, one can be flexible, but at the same time, we can't just bend to the will of others, because then you compromise who you are as an individual. I'll get into more detail next week about my beginning forays into alternative media. There was no foul play, folks. A year or two ago, Michael Rupert, another alternative media figure, also ended his own life, likely due to depression. You can't surround yourself by negative news and negative emotions all the time and put the proverbial weight of the world on your shoulders. It's not healthy. And again, there have been others who've said some things that are not so very nice. I'm not going to be so mean, but at the same time, I don't blame them. But it's also acted as a wake-up call to me that there does need to be actual competition in certain realms in terms of media creation, because I'm seeing some of these entities out there that still exist to this day that are operating on an outdated paradigm. Their stuff still works. You can still hop on certain websites, stream audio and everything else. But we've gotten to the point where we don't necessarily need that anymore. You don't need to have a dedicated server streaming a, radio type stream when you can put up a podcast and just have people download and share all around the world. You could literally start this in your bedroom and have a mass audience in a relatively short period of time, depending on your talent and dedication. And I haven't been as dedicated as I should have been. But in the back of my mind, I've asked myself, where am I going with this? And I know this is kind of a long, rambling type of thing, but I needed to talk about this. And every now and then, I may get a live viewer. I had one for a moment, and then they left. But in the end, when I do start talking the next few days, it's going to be on the 101st episode of the podcast, of the Next Report podcast. It's going to be also followed up by an article that's going to be, published in a timely fashion. And by timely, I mean on such a day where it's likely going to get some viewership, some readership, viewership, etc. But if I could look you in the eye one more time before you'd passed, I would have asked you one question, Scott. What's it like to push everybody away and wind up alone? Because that's what I believe you did. And that's a lesson that I'm going to keep carrying with me for the rest of my life. Don't push people away. Decompress, that's fine. Don't surround yourself with negative news all the time. And yeah, I'm going to still be aware of what's going on, but I'm not going to let it destroy me like it's destroyed other people. Because while the Next Report's aim is to, show people a different world along with some pretty cool stuff, in my opinion, it's not going to peddle in what's called fear porn, because there's been enough of that already. Yeah, that's pretty much it. But it's funniest things that can happen, strangest things that can happen, that suddenly signal that we're in a new era. And the next episode of the podcast is going to likely be solo, because part of it's going to be me sorting through my own thoughts on this. So with that in mind, Entertain yourself, educate yourself, empower yourself, but most importantly, live, because life's too short. And by all means, please learn from the mistakes of others so that you can be better tomorrow than you were today. Be better today than you were yesterday. Thank you for hearing me out. I'll talk to you all again soon.